Welcome back to Jeff Koinange live here at Citizen Television. It's all about COVID-19. With the holiday season upon us, we want to get a report card check on where the country stands. And also, the other day, a new variant was discovered in South Africa by their own scientists, and they raised the flag to the world. And guess what happened? They got punished for it. South Africa shut off. Actually, 7 Southern African countries shut off from most of Europe and the Far East. Why? Who does that? Is that discrimination, racism, vaccine, apartheid, whatever you want to call it? Let's discuss this with our very own favorite doctors on the bench. Dr. Loice Ombajo, she's a infectious disease specialist at the University of Nairobi, and Dr. Githinji, he's a group CEO, Amref Health Africa. Both, good to see you both. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
Love the socks.
Thank you, Jeff. I was trying to compete with you, then you wear black.
They're actually navy blue, but it looks black.
So, okay.
Okay. Karibuni sana.
Thank you.
So, am I right here that this new variant, Omicron, or what do you call it, Omicron, was discovered by South African scientists. And they raised the flag to the rest of the world. They said, hey guys, by the way, there's this new strain. Is that what happened?
Basically, that's what happened. They began to note that as they were doing surveillance, which is a good thing, countries that have a good surveillance network are able to identify threats earlier. So as they were doing the surveillance, they discovered that there's something that looks different from what we've noted in the past. And they began to share what they call the sequences, which is just what does a gene look like, you know? And they began to share that. And then, yes, people confirmed that it was different from what had been seen before, and they shared that with the WHO. So, yes, they raised the flag and said there's something we're seeing that's different from what has been seen before.
And Dr. G, they raised the flag and they got slapped down for it. I watched an interview you did on CNN over the weekend, and I said, yes, doctor, well done. Because they were trying to say, you know, this is Africa. If it was, we told you, these Africans, this is where the disease is. This is the what do you call, ground zero, if you will. So it was very unfair, huh?
In whose hands are we safe, Jeff? You know, I watch you a lot. Yeah. Because really, I think, you know, this point is that we are only safe in our own hands. There is significant discrimination, selective travel bans, which have actually on my CNN clip, I called it racism. It's what it is. Because you have a situation where you have a variant which, by WHO standards, is supposed to be reported once you find it. That's the requirement of every country. We call those international health regulations of 2005. We are renegotiating them now with WHO. But they require that if you find a biological element of danger to the world, you must report it. So South Africa finds it through very good genomic sequencing and reports it. This virus, so far, is available in more than 15 countries. We have information that actually some countries, like the Netherlands, had this virus even before. The first sample that was found to have this by the South Africans had been collected on 9th of November. When did they report it? Maybe 24th, 25th. So you're talking about almost 2 weeks or something. By the time there's UK and others are saying, now let's lock down travel, this virus is all over the world. And it's in Israel. It is in Czech Republic. It is in Germany. So why do you select 6 African countries and say these are the ones we are banning to travel to our countries, but yet your neighbors have the same variant? What is the aim? And the aim is racism. It is actually segregation. It is selective discrimination and stigmatization. And I actually think it is a way of trying to divert the attention from the vaccine injustice to now say, look, let's first deal with this thing here, because you are the ones who are actually holding the vaccines that the world should have. And you have had so much flack on the vaccines, holding them out without sharing them equally, and now you have something to cry about, and therefore you divert the attention of the world. This is really the issue, and I think if Africans don't call it what it is, then we are going to continue getting this level of discrimination. It happened when we got the vaccines coming up. It happened when we were looking for PPEs. Remember when we were looking for PPEs, they were locked out. You know, we had problems getting reagents to tests for COVID-19, okay? And now the virus has been given a nationality. It has even been given a passport. Who is this person allocating a passport to a virus that's actually global and now calling it South African and saying is this? It is discrimination and we must call it out. And the African Union must speak out. Because if we leave South Africa on their own, They can't fight this battle. The African must speak out. And I'm really happy for the African countries not to stop or not to institute travel bans again in South Africa, except I hear Mauritius or something,
Mauritius,
and I think, I don't know which other country, which is shameful and embarrassing. Africans must fight together and say, do not divert their attention from vaccines.
Dr. Loice, I know it's early days with this new variant, but according to scientists, they say it's pretty mild compared to, say, Delta before that.
We've seen those reports where at least doctors who've been managing patients who may have this variant are saying they haven't seen overwhelming severe cases. And as you said, it's still early days, so the patients are still few. It's very difficult to decide what course it will take. When the Delta variant first came, sometime, it was around June, July of this year when we started seeing the larger spikes. The first cases, again, we thought maybe they present with slightly odd symptoms or they're not too severe. But as time evolved, we started to see very severe disease. We started to see it affecting populations that are traditionally not been affected too much. So, for example, pregnant women were significantly affected. We started seeing slightly younger people. So even with this variant, it's still early days, and the issue is really to be vigilant and to continue to protect those who would be most vulnerable. Because as a variant comes, as more and more people get sick, then it will end up reaching the vulnerable in society. Remember, initially it's those who are up and about, who are out, who are likely to be the younger people, who are more likely to have milder disease. And we really have to work at protecting and shielding those who may have more severe disease.
Dr. Githinji mentioned a moment ago, this Omicron variant is in several countries around the world.
Yes.
Has it reached Kenya yet? Is it here yet? Do we know?
So we think it could be everywhere in the world. So as Dr. Githinji said, the first case in South Africa was probably on the 9th of November. So if you think about the amount of travel that happens globally from European countries, a number of which have begun to report this variant, as well as African countries, then you can imagine that already there's been a lot of travel and a lot of spread globally. So at this point, we really can't say whether we have it or not. I know part of what the Ministry of Health would be doing at such a time as this is testing a lot of people who come in who may have symptoms, and anyone who tests positive, then that sample is taken for genomic sequencing, which tells us the gene of this virus is what is defined as Omicron. So there's genomic surveillance has to be strengthened at a time such as this.
Yeah. Dr. G, you mentioned it for what it is. It's total discrimination. And it's been happening for the last almost going on 2 years now. Going on 2 years. And yet we're not speaking as one. Like you said, the African Union, the African continent has to speak as one. Look at the level of vaccination on the continent, 3.5% average. Come on, man. Are we ever going to maintain a level playing field, if you will?
No, we cannot. And I think this is how resources are shared globally. And this is what has been going on for a long time. And I think that when you look at these travel bans, it is actually a statement that African countries are dispensable. That's a statement, that your trade is not significant enough, so we can actually show our people in our country. It's nationalism. You have to see it for what it is. And remember, nationalism is different from patriotism. Patriotism is when your country comes first. Nationalism is when you hate other people. And this is what these countries are doing, saying we are first going to show our people that we are the only ones that matter. But because we can't put a sanction against Germany, we can't put a sanction against Netherlands, let us pick the weakest in the lot and put a sanction so that we have headlines that we have done something. This is what it is. And the only way to stop it is for African Union to take a stand and say this is WHO has taken a stand, Africa Centers for Disease Control has taken a stand. I haven't heard anything from the African Union, which is not acceptable. Of course, Cyril Ramaphosa has been speaking against it. Our own President Kenyatta, has talked against it. African Union must take a stand. And this stand is not only for this particular Omicron, it is also for vaccines. I know that we are debating a lot of time about how Africa should manufacture its own vaccines. Kenya itself wants to manufacture its own vaccines. My position is very different. My position is that we must not look at vaccines as let us manufacture vaccines for ourselves because our people have denied us. We must decide to make Africa a center of excellence for manufacturing for the world, not for Africa. Because we are then propagating this notion that Africa, here we are, we are the kid, the bad kid in the block, so let's try and do our own things. We must conquer the world. And the way to conquer the world is actually to create a common market for the continent, 4.3 billion people, through the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, and then create a common regulatory framework, and then we manufacture vaccines for the world. Why is it that the biggest vaccine manufacturing plant in the world is in India? It's not in Europe, it's in India. Because India decided to manufacture vaccines for the world. So even the ones coming here as AstraZeneca are from India. Africa should look at it that way. They should get together. And I don't support this thing of every country trying to build its own small manufacturing plant. We're not going to get anywhere.
Didn't the same South Africa get the okay to manufacture Johnson & Johnson or then distribute? Didn't they get that?
Well, they did, but it was actually very limited. It is not under a purely voluntary license. So some of those vaccines are under control of J&J. And that's why initially there was noise, because some of the ones that were manufactured early were shipped to Europe, if you remember that. So we are still a long way to go, Jeff.
Yeah.
Still a long way to go.
Dr. Loice, a long way to go. And unless we get our vaccination numbers up, there's no way. I mean, we'll be locked out as a continent.
Yes.
We'll be locked out.
That's true. We know from at least the data that we have from other countries, most countries managed to control the biggest waves they had by really ramping up vaccination for most people. And as a soft target, we want to aim to have at least 40% of the population fully vaccinated. And I think recently I saw something that was produced by the European CDC, and they're advising countries that have less than 60% of their population vaccinated to start putting in a lot of restrictions for the population, because those are the countries that are having the highest numbers in Europe. So even for Africa, we have to think about how to ramp up vaccination. And much as we want vaccines to come in, once they come in, we have to think about uptake. As it is, Kenya has had quite a bit of vaccines in country, but the uptake has been quite slow. It's only in the last week or so that we're seeing people beginning to go in for the vaccination. So other than getting the vaccines in country, we have to think about what are some of the issues that are stopping people getting vaccinated. Is it an issue of access? So if I have to go to a vaccine center and leave my work and go 5 miles and think about transport, then maybe I'm less likely to take that road. So we have to think about getting vaccines to where the people are that is convenient to them. There's still a lot of vaccine hesitancy and fear, even amongst healthcare workers, people I work with who haven't gotten the vaccine. So we really have to think around how do we overcome this fear. Maybe it's around the messaging. It's about increasing education at the community level so that people want to get vaccinated. Because it doesn't matter how much vaccine comes in, if we don't get it into us, it's not going to help us. And currently our vaccine numbers are still quite low, especially in many counties actually in the country.
Actually, let me get to those numbers. Dr. G, you're on the COVID-19 task force. What are the numbers? We're supposed to target 10 million Kenyans to be vaccinated by the end of December. Where do we stand?
So let's first correct that we are supposed to give 10 million doses by December. That kind of is the figure we are working with. Right now we are at about 7.1 million. And if you look at the current vaccination rate, yesterday was 113,000 in one day. Okay, 113,000. That's very high. So if you just use that and you say we are going to vaccinate 600,000 people per week for the next 4 weeks as an extension, you say 2.5 add to the 7.1. So my number is that we are going to be very close. We may not hit the 10 million, but I think we'll score 95%, which is an A plus actually.
Nairobi?
Nairobi has vaccinated the most. So if you look at Nairobi now, we have vaccinated about 1.2 million people, 1.3 have received their first dose. That is about 40% of the population above 18. And the people who've received 2 doses are close to 30%, about 27%. But as Dr. Ari says, we have a challenge with some counties. And those counties, when you actually look at the counties that are having a challenge, it is the less urbanized counties, which speaks to actually a much bigger factor of access than hesitancy. The two play together, but I think access is a big deal. And that access means that if I'm in Tana River and I need to travel for half a day to go get a vaccine, it doesn't matter how much information you give me, I'm not going to do that, because the motivation and incentive. By the way, you may be aware that in the US, people are getting $100 to get vaccinated.
Correct.
Give me $100, you see what I can do with it here. A whole village will come for vaccination. So we must also look at these things, that here people are having to incur a cost to go for it. In the US, people are having to be paid to go for it. getting food vouchers and stuff like that. So if we remove those factors, then we must actually address the access issue. And the access issue means that the government must invest in going to the people, number one. And going to the people is not just delivering the vaccines where they are, but delivering the vaccines where they work, live, and play. Meaning that on Sunday, we should have people at church vaccinating people. We should work with the religious leaders to say, after this service, vaccination comes from intelligence given by God. Please go there and get vaccinated. Overcoming those challenges is important. We have to go off-grid. We can't just stay in the facility. Right. That's what we are going to do. We must overcome the excess. When we've overcome the excess, then the remnant is hesitancy, and we can address it.
I wonder if we can use political rallies to vaccinate people. After the rally or before the rally.
Before the rally. If you are not vaccinated, you're coming to this rally. And you know why? Because the rally actually pays people to join. You know that.
Yes.
We pay people a little money to come to the rally. So we say, you're not getting this money. Get vaccinated, get the money, then
go for the rally.
Go. Yes. You've just given some politician a really good idea.
If they get everyone vaccinated, we'll vote for them.
Exactly.
All right. Dr. Second dose. How are we looking on the second dose?
We are okay, because I would say that about 2.7, 2.8 million people have received their second dose. And the thing that we don't realize is that when we got the first dose, there were many challenges between the first dose and second dose. Number one is people didn't know whether to wait for 8 weeks, 12 weeks, 16 weeks. Then we started getting mixed vaccine strategies. You're offering AstraZeneca, Pfizer, Moderna, J&J. So you go to your facility where you received your first dose, and you're told, no, we don't have the one we gave you for the first dose, so please go back home and come back later. What is the incentive of an individual who has not been sick at all, who has to understand that a vaccine is not individual benefit, it is actually population level benefit, and now has to spend money again to go back? So that has interfered with the second dose because of the absence of vaccines in a uniform manner between first dose and second dose.
And Doc, what's wrong with mix and matching? Remember we talked about this before.
We did. I was for mixing at the time. I was for mixing that time.
Yes.
So, I think we have sufficient data now to suggest that mixing is okay. In many cases, it's even associated with a slightly higher immune response. I think the issues around mixing are more about the logistics and availability of vaccines for various countries before they can take a stand on that. And also it's about educating people as well around what is available when they can get it. Where you have sufficient doses of the same vaccine, then go ahead and get the same vaccine. Where there's a challenge, I think we should be open to the mixing of vaccines.
Yeah, the issues, and we had this debate here with Loice, and I love this.
Yes.
Because the science, and Loice has a lot of it, is saying, yes, you can mix. We haven't reached to a place where the policy framework supports the science. And there are many issues. Some of the issues are about what we call off-label use. So if you say mix, does it mean mix AstraZeneca and Pfizer, or Pfizer and Moderna, or Moderna and J&J? So if you say mix, then it means if I got AstraZeneca and I go to a clinic and I find Moderna, I should receive it. But there's no data from either of the two manufacturers that says that the two work together. That's what you call off-label, meaning the science is okay, but there's nothing that's written that you should use these two, but you're using them because there's general science. And I think that's where WHO has struggled. Because when you say mix, then what if, which one should we mix with which? Number two is, what's the gap between mixing? So we know AstraZeneca 2 doses is
12 weeks.
12 weeks. So what if you go on the 12th week and you find AstraZeneca is not there? Is it okay to now get Moderna, or should you wait for 20 weeks? No science is available. So whereas I agree 100%, mixing and match is the way to go, we need a more robust scientific base to then create the policy framework.
Good point. A lot of countries in the West are boasting of having a third booster and a fourth booster. They're out there saying, let's go for number 3, number 4. That's really unfair when some people haven't even gotten number 1.
Let me give you an example. If we were hungry, all of us, and then there was bread in a supermarket in your village, and then you, Jeff, because you have money, and the people around you and your family run to the supermarket, and then you enter and you take each 10 loaves of bread, because you don't know whether it's going to run out again. So you hold it. Then the folks later who are probably doing a harambe, raising money, calling Loice, please send us some money. By the time they get there, There's no
bread on the shelves.
There's no bread on the shelf. Isn't it logical that now when you've settled and found, actually 2 loaves of bread are enough, that you actually hand over the loaves of bread to the guys who came later? What's happening is that these people are still holding the bread. Now, the question then to ask is, from a hunger point of view, from 0 to 1 bread is actually more important than from 1 bread to the second bread. Okay? Mm-hmm. There is what we call cost effectiveness and marginal gains or stuff like that. So you say if you have no vaccine at all, your first dose, we say it gives you up to 50 or something % protection. Mm-hmm. Second dose takes you to 85, 90%. So the cost effectiveness of the first 2 doses is so high that you cannot convince me that cost effectiveness of an extra dose moving you from 92 to 94 is actually of significance versus somebody getting a primary dose which moves them from 0 to 90%. So the booster doses are giving extra immunity, yes, but the incremental gain does not equate to the value you get from primary vaccination of somebody who has no dose. So they should stop the booster doses unless for those scientifically proven they need them because they probably did not develop adequate immunity, the elderly, or they have an autoimmune disease, therefore they did not get. That should be, but saying you're rolling out 3rd dose to everybody, including children, is actually just saying, I can't do this because this is a family show. But it's basically saying, you do what you want to do. I would have used once, but I won't.
Please do.
Yeah. I think maybe one of the things that's important for people to realize is if you get, as he rightly says, a first dose, you achieve some level of protection for everyone, which means you reduce the speed with which the virus is moving in the community. And when you reduce that, you also reduce emergence of variants. So by getting everybody vaccinated by at least some dose of the vaccine, you actually protect everybody else, both from whichever variant is there and from future variants as well. So in order for us to get ahead of these variants, we need to reduce the amount of virus in the community, and that's by vaccinating the highest number of people we can, as opposed to super vaccinating just a small proportion of that population.
Yeah. Exactly. Before I go to break, real quick, the greedy ones, the Dr. G was saying, with the 10 loaves of bread at home, those loaves of bread have a sell-by date. And I'm sure the vaccines have a sell-by date, don't they? Won't they expire after a while and you're still hoarding them?
So I think one of the things is so earlier in the response is the countries that hoarded a lot of vaccine then started quickly giving them away as they're approaching their expiry date. Exactly. So it's probably, and the problem is when they now give such a large volume away at once, the logistics of trying to vaccinate many people at once is also difficult. So it's better to release them as they come so that you're able to vaccinate more people.
Agreed. Agreed. I want to take a break, come back, talk about vaccine for kids. We've got Pfizer, I think, that's in for 15-year-olds, is that right, for teenagers? Right? That just came in. What are your thoughts on that? And also, do we have enough vaccines in the country? Or are there more coming? I saw, I think 1.4 million came in for AstraZeneca or something. Yeah. So are there enough in Kenya right now? Yeah. And also, it's a holiday season. People are going to be traveling, and the virus will be traveling with them. Is there a cause for concern? Wow, what a conversation we're having, folks. I'm sure you guys are being as enlightened as I am. When Dr. G and Dr. Loice show up, you need paper and pen in hand. Keep tweeting at Koinange Jeff, at Citizen TV Kenya, the hashtag JKLive. JKLive takes a break. We'll be back in a moment.